What's the most disgusting thing you've ever done? Story 1. I was broke at Six Flags and starving when I saw a guy toss a nearly full tray of chicken nuggets into the trash. They were sitting upright in their container, untouched by the rest of the garbage. Without hesitation, I reached in, grabbed them, and ate like a king. My friends were mortified, but hey, free nuggets are free nuggets. Sometimes life hands you lemons or chicken nuggets, and you just go for it. Story 2. At a high school party, I accidentally grabbed someone else's red Solo cup and took a huge gulp. It wasn't beer. It was their chew spit. I froze, mouth full, and then sprinted to the bathroom to spit it out. The taste haunts me to this day, and now I refuse to drink from anything without a lid. Story 3. I found an old chocolate bar in a dusty box at home and decided to eat it despite its weird texture. Only afterward did I realize it wasn't just old. It was a keepsake from my birth with my name and birth date printed on the wrapper. I ate my own baby memento. My mom laughed so hard she cried. Story 4. When I was 5, I got thirsty while playing outside and found a puddle in the parking lot. I picked up a straw someone had dropped and slurped the water like it was a milkshake. My mom saw me mid-slurp and screamed like I'd committed a crime. I didn't get sick, but I learned that puddles are nature's toilet bowl. Story 5. As a kid, I ate too much sugar at an all-inclusive resort and felt sick by the pool. Instead of running to the bathroom, I thought it'd be smart to jump in the water to hide it. I started puking mid-air, and by the time I surfaced, chunks were floating everywhere. They evacuated the pool, and my dad teased me about it for 20 years. Story 6. When I was a kid, my mom had this habit of keeping odd sentimental items, and apparently that included a chocolate bar from my birth. I found it one day while rummaging through an old box in the pantry. It was a little dusty, sure, but otherwise intact. I was about to throw it out, but my sweet tooth got the better of me. I unwrapped it, and it looked fine. I took a bite, and let me tell you, it tasted exactly like you'd expect a 20-year-old chocolate bar to taste, stale, waxy, with a hint of cardboard. I powered through, eating the whole thing before noticing the wrapper had writing on it. It wasn't just any wrapper. It had my name, birth weight, and other details printed on it. Turns out it was a keepsake my mom got as a memento. I felt a pit in my stomach, not just from the disgusting chocolate, but from the sheer horror of realizing I'd just eaten something meant to commemorate my arrival into the world. My mom couldn't stop laughing when I told her. "At least you didn't eat the other one," she said, holding up the second bar like it was the Holy Grail. Lesson learned. Not all chocolate is meant to be eaten. Story 7. I was 15, broke, and starving at Six Flags with my friends. We were stuck at the food court during a rainstorm, huddled by a trash can because there weren't any open tables. That's when I saw it. A guy dumped a tray of chicken tenders right on top of the trash. But here's the thing. They weren't touching any other garbage. The container was upright, and only one tender was missing. I stared at it for a second before deciding, why the hell not? I reached in, grabbed the tray, and sat back down like it was a totally normal thing to do. My friends were mortified, but I was too hungry to care. Those chicken tenders were surprisingly good, and honestly, it felt like a little gift from the universe. I didn't get sick or anything, but looking back, I realize how desperate I must have looked. To this day, though, I stand by that decision. Free chicken is free chicken. Story 8. I was at an outdoor music festival, and things were going great until I dropped my phone. And not just anywhere, I dropped it in the porta-potty. I stared down into that dark, foul abyss, trying to convince myself it wasn't worth it. But then I thought about how much I'd paid for that phone and how I hadn't backed up my photos. So, against all better judgment, I rolled up my sleeve, held my breath, and reached in. The heat, the smell, the sheer horror of it all, I can't even describe it. My hand brushed against something unidentifiable before I finally grabbed my phone. As soon as I pulled it out, I bolted to the nearest water station to scrub it down with soap and sanitizer. Then I wrapped it in wet wipes and shoved it in a plastic bag. It took weeks before I could use it without feeling like I was holding a biohazard. But hey, at least I didn't lose my contacts. That was the day I truly questioned my priorities in life. Story 9. I used to share an office with this one coworker who was, to put it kindly, a slob. She would leave half-empty coffee mugs on her desk until they grew mold. One day I came in after being out sick for a week. My desk was tidy, but hers looked like a science experiment. I grabbed my coffee and took a big gulp, only to realize it wasn't my coffee. I'd picked up one of her old moldy mugs by accident. I froze as the lumpy liquid slid down my throat. My gag reflex kicked in, but it was too late. I spent the rest of the day dry-heaving and couldn't look at coffee the same way for months. To this day, I double-check every cup before I take a sip. And as for her, she just laughed it off like it was no big deal. I still hold a grudge. Story 10. I got absolutely plastered at a house party one night and knew I'd regret it. Before passing out, I set a big beer stein of water by my bed, figuring I'd need it when I woke up dehydrated. Sure enough, I woke up in the middle of the night, drained the whole thing, and went back to sleep. A few hours later, I woke up again, this time to puke. I grabbed the first large container I could find, the beer stein. I hurled into it, set it down, and passed out again. When I woke up the third time, my brain reset to thirsty mode. Without thinking, I grabbed the stein, took a massive gulp, and instantly realized my mistake. The warm, chunky liquid hit my tongue, and I spit it out immediately, but the damage was done. I spent the next hour retching and cursing myself for being the dumbest drunk alive. That was the last time I partied without a backup plan, or a bucket. Story 11. When I was 16, I got my first job at an ice cream shop. It seemed fun at first, until the day I was asked to clean the storage room. It didn't take long to figure out why they avoided it. It was disgusting. There were chewed-up ice cream cones everywhere, rat droppings scattered across the floor, and a sticky, unidentifiable sludge pooling in the corner. My manager handed me gloves and a broom and said, "You'll be fine." Fine? I was gagging within minutes. As I swept, I accidentally knocked over a half-eaten cone, which sent a cascade of rat droppings rolling into the sludge. The smell was unbearable. I dry-heaved so many times that a customer passing by the open door asked if I was okay. I powered through, but for weeks afterward I couldn't even look at ice cream without thinking of that day. I quit 2 months later and never set foot in that shop again. Story 12. Back when I was working as an ER tech, I had to do a lot of unpleasant things, but nothing prepared me for the infamous milk and molasses enema. We had a patient so constipated that they hadn't gone in days, and this was the doctor's last resort. I had to administer it, and let's just say it wasn't pretty. The molasses smelled awful, and once it kicked in, the patient exploded. I wasn't quick enough to dodge the fallout, and I ended up covered in it. I could feel it on my skin, my scrubs, even my face mask. Worst of all, it ruined gingerbread cookies for me forever. Every time I smell molasses now, I flash back to that moment. People always say the medical field is rewarding, but they don't talk about the trauma of being coated in someone else's bodily fluids. Story 13. I was about 10 years old and on vacation with my dad at a fancy, all-inclusive resort. Like any kid, I went overboard on the sugary drinks and desserts. One afternoon, I was lounging by the pool when my stomach suddenly churned, and I knew I was about to throw up. For some reason, my brilliant 10-year-old brain thought it would be better to jump into the pool instead of running to a trash can. Big mistake. I started vomiting mid-air and didn't stop once I hit the water. When I came up for air, chunks of everything I'd eaten were floating around me. People were screaming and pointing, and the lifeguards evacuated the pool. They shut it down for the entire day to clean it. My dad teased me about it for years, saying I ruined paradise for everyone. That day, I learned 2 things. Never binge on desserts, and pools are not a great hiding spot. Story 14. It was a classic high school basement party, dimly lit, music blasting, and red Solo cups everywhere. I was halfway through my drink when I set my cup down to join a conversation. A few minutes later, I grabbed what I thought was mine and took a huge gulp. The taste hit me immediately, warm, bitter, and salty. It wasn't beer. It was someone's chew-spit cup. I froze, my mouth still full, before sprinting to the bathroom to spit it out. I rinsed my mouth about 20 times, but the taste wouldn't go away. I spent the rest of the night swearing off parties, solo cups, and humanity in general. To this day, I still can't believe people spit into cups and just leave them lying around. That was the last party I went to for a very long time. Story 15. When I worked in biohazard cleanup, I thought I'd seen it all, until I was sent to clean a hoarder's house. It wasn't just a hoarder's house, though. It was also an unattended death site. And as if that weren't enough, the family had left several dead pets inside as well. The smell hit me before I even walked through the door, a mix of decay, ammonia, and rotting food. Inside, there were piles of garbage, feces, and decomposing animal remains. At one point, I had to pick up what I thought was a bundle of rags, only to realize it was a mummified cat. My gloves tore while handling it, and I nearly threw up right there. By the end of the day, I couldn't tell if the smell was stuck in my clothes or if it had permanently burned into my nose. I went home, took a shower, and sat in silence, questioning why I'd ever taken that job. Some things you just can't unsee. Story 16. I used to work in a physical therapy office, and one day we had a patient with advanced cancer in her spine. She couldn't control her bladder or bowels anymore, but she still insisted on wearing regular underwear instead of adult diapers. During her session, she had an accident. She apologized profusely, but I reassured her we'd take care of it. What I didn't realize was that it wasn't just urine. When we removed her pants, there was diarrhea everywhere, and some of it had matted into her pubic hair. My coworker handed me scissors, and I had to carefully cut it out while trying not to gag. We used an entire pack of wet wipes to clean her up. She was so embarrassed, and I felt awful for her. But I did my best to act like it wasn't a big deal. Later, I had a long conversation with her family about transitioning to diapers. That day, I realized that helping someone maintain their dignity can mean doing things you never imagined doing. Story 17. This one isn't mine, but it's too insane not to share. My brother-in-law, in his teenage years, apparently thought it would be funny to take a crap in a public restroom soap dispenser. And not just any dispenser, the kind where you can't see the contents inside. He somehow managed to do it without anyone noticing and then left, thinking it was the prank of the century. Fast forward to the poor unsuspecting souls trying to wash their hands, pumping out more and more soap, wondering why it smelled so terrible. When he told me this story years later, I was horrified. I asked him what on earth possessed him to do it, and his only response was, "I was a dumb teenager." Yeah, no kidding. To this day, I always check soap dispensers before using them. You just never know. Story 18. I was about 5 years old and playing outside on a hot summer day. I got super thirsty but didn't want to stop playing, so I decided to get creative. I found a puddle in the parking lot, grabbed a discarded straw from the ground, and slurped up some water like it was a Capri Sun. My mom caught me mid-slurp and screamed so loud that I dropped the straw and burst into tears. I didn't understand why she was so mad until later, when she explained that puddles are basically bacteria soup. To this day, I don't know how I didn't get sick, but I'm pretty sure that moment is why I have an iron stomach. Even now, every time I see a puddle, I cringe at the memory of my 5-year-old self chugging rainwater like it was fine dining. Story 19. When I got into biohazard cleanup, I knew it wasn't going to be glamorous, but nothing prepared me for that job. It was a hoarder's house, an unattended death site, and a dead pet cleanup all rolled into one horrifying mess. The homeowner had passed away weeks earlier, and they had left behind a house full of garbage, animals, and decay. The smell was unbearable. It hit me like a wall the second I stepped out of the truck. Ammonia from urine, rotting food, and something sour that I later realized was decomposing flesh. It clung to my clothes, my skin, my hair. Even with gloves and a mask, I could feel the filth permeating everything. Inside, the floor wasn't visible, just piles of junk that reached almost to the ceiling. Old newspapers, broken furniture, and random knickknacks covered every inch. Among the trash were the skeletal remains of several pets. A mummified cat was curled up on what must have been a couch at some point, and I nearly lost my lunch when I picked up a pile of rags that turned out to be another dead animal. The kitchen was its own nightmare. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes caked in mold, and there were maggots crawling out of an old takeout container on the counter. The refrigerator? I didn't even open it. No way was I risking that. Then there was the bedroom where the homeowner had died. The mattress was stained with bodily fluids, and the smell of decomposition was so strong that it made my eyes water. There were flies everywhere, thousands of them buzzing around the room, landing on my gloves, my mask, my hair. At one point, I had to stop and take a break outside, gagging and trying not to throw up. Even then, I could still smell it. It felt like it was embedded in my nostrils. It took 3 days to clean the house. We threw out almost everything, scrubbing the floors and walls with industrial cleaners until they were nearly raw. I'll never forget the moment I found a photo of the homeowner from years ago, a smiling, happy person holding a cat. It made me wonder what had gone so wrong in their life to end up like this. That job stayed with me for weeks. Even after multiple showers, I felt like I could still smell the house. It wasn't just the filth that haunted me. It was the thought that someone could die alone in such misery and squalor. That's a kind of horror you can't clean up with bleach. Story 20. I thought it couldn't get worse than the time I ate a 20-year-old chocolate bar, but it did. After eating it, I found out it was a keepsake from my birth, with "Here he is" and my birth stats printed on the wrapper. My mom laughed it off, saying, "At least you didn't eat the other one." That was when I realized she'd kept 2. Curious, I picked up the second bar and took a closer look. It wasn't just chocolate. It was filled with information about me as a baby, like a sugary time capsule. I still can't believe I ate something that was basically a trophy of my mom's sentimental side. She found the whole thing hilarious, but I couldn't touch chocolate for weeks. Now every time I see a Hershey's bar, I feel like it's judging me. Story 21. I was at a packed concert with my friends, having a great time, when disaster struck. Someone nearby vomited on the floor, and in the chaos of people moving around, I didn't notice it. I took a step forward, slipped, and fell straight into the puddle of puke. As I tried to scramble to my feet, I slipped again, this time smearing it across my jeans and arms. People around me gasped and recoiled, but nobody helped. I was left to handle it solo. Finally, I got up, wiped my hands on my shirt. What else could I do? And walked out of the venue like nothing had happened. The worst part? I still had to take public transportation home, covered in someone else's vomit. I showered for what felt like an hour when I got back. That concert taught me 2 things. Always watch where you step, and maybe concerts aren't worth the hassle. Story 22. As an EMT, I thought I'd seen it all, but one summer in New Jersey proved me wrong. We were called to a hoarder's trailer in the middle of August, and the smell hit us the second we opened the door. Cat feces, rotting food, and trash were piled everywhere. The patient had been dead for hours, but we still had to perform CPR. I knelt down to start compressions and realized I was kneeling in pounds of old cat litter mixed with newspaper and God knows what else. The sweat pouring down my face didn't help the smell, and every breath felt like inhaling poison. We worked on her for 45 minutes, but she didn't make it. Afterward, I drove home in silence, my uniform still reeking of ammonia and decay. That night, I couldn't eat or sleep. I just sat there wondering how people could live like that. It was the most surreal and revolting experience of my career. Story 23. This story still haunts me because it was both disgusting and humiliating. A few years ago, I went to a big outdoor concert with my friends. It was packed, thousands of people crammed together, jumping and dancing, beer sloshing everywhere. We were having a great time when I noticed a weird smell. I didn't think much of it at first. Concerts aren't exactly known for their fresh air. But then I felt something wet under my foot. I looked down and saw a puddle of vomit, still warm and fresh. Before I could react, someone shoved me from behind and I slipped. My feet went out from under me and I landed straight into the puddle, hands first. The crowd around me roared with laughter as I scrambled to get up, but the puke had made the ground so slick that I slipped again, this time landing on my side. It was everywhere, on my jeans, my arms, even my hair. I finally managed to stand up, but I was so mortified that I couldn't look anyone in the eye. My friends tried to help me clean up, but there wasn't much they could do with napkins and a bottle of water. I could feel the vomit soaking into my clothes, and the smell was overpowering. People were staring, some even taking pictures. I wanted to leave immediately, but the parking lot was so far away that I had to walk through the entire venue to get to the exit. Every step felt like a walk of shame, with people recoiling from the smell as I passed. When I finally got to my car, I stripped down to my underwear in the parking lot and threw my clothes in a trash bag I found in the trunk. The ride home was silent. I was too embarrassed to say anything, and my friends didn't know how to console me. Even now, years later, I can't go to a concert without feeling anxious. Every time I step into a crowd, I'm hyper-aware of the ground, terrified of repeating that nightmare. That day taught me two things. Always wear shoes with good traction, and maybe concerts aren't worth the risk of public humiliation.